Hello, welcome to the first TEDx Mountain View, the heart of technology, innovation, diversity, transformation, positive ideas to shape a positive world. We are so happy that you can join us from literally all around the world, 5 continents we think, for 2 hours of inspirational talks. My name is Jennifer Barr, and I am the curator of TEDx Mountain View and the licensee. I am coming to you live from Mountain View, California, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley. Google headquarters is 3 miles that way, LinkedIn 3 miles that way, and Facebook and Apple are about 8 miles in each direction. So it makes sense for us to talk to you about the heart of technology. We're going to hear from speakers who are both dealing with the heart of core technologies that are going to transform the way the world looks. And we are dealing with speakers who are working with heart and technology to help make a difference in the world. You see, my vision for this event started when I was a little girl. I had a vision that people would interact with each other with care and with love. And when I was in my 20s, that vision expanded to include everyone in the world having access to basic needs. That's housing, food, education, healthcare, and respect. Everyone having access to dignity and joy and fulfillment. And I want to thank my family, my father, David Barr, my sister, Edith, my late mother, Eva, for helping instill these important values and helping support me in maintaining them over my life. You see, these values and this vision have reached roadblocks in my life. One of the more painful being my mother dying quite young in her 50s of cancer. There have been painful breakups in between me and my vision, difficult layoffs, economic uncertainty, endings, and in these last 18 months, in a global pandemic, with economic uncertainty and political unrest, I am watching not just me, but billions of people dealing with these roadblocks that seem to be characterizing our lives. And it is so easy to get trapped in that cycle of negative news when we're worried about our health and finances. Well, in March of 2021, I'd had enough. My study of neuroscience has told me that if I want to try to overcome a cycle of negative thinking, that I need to develop positive thinking. I need to focus on what I want to create and build new neural nets in my brain. In March, I decided it was time for me to do what Einstein suggests, to be the change I want to be in the world, to start now to actualize my vision, no matter how remote and impossible it seems. So I founded TEDx Mountain View to spread good ideas and to help with my vision of using my time and talents to bring out the best in others. Underlying the speaking choices is another motivation. I wanted to model the American dream, which has helped make Silicon Valley what it is. I wanted to model diversity, not necessarily as a speaker topic, but what it looks like when people are valued and talent can meet opportunity regardless of age, regardless of gender or race or any kind of personal preferences, where that is the norm, not the exception. And like me, over half our speakers are either immigrants or children of immigrants. Over half our speakers are women, and over half our speakers are over the age of 40. But all of our speakers have overcome challenges to do work in the world that's making a contribution in their communities. I've been really fortunate to be on the core organizing team of at least 12 TEDx events, the first one at the United Nations, the first 2 at Stanford University, the first 8 at UC Berkeley. And this is the first time that I'm curator, that I'm licensee, and I'm so thrilled and grateful that you are here and that I can share with you my passion project to spread positive ideas in the world. A couple of logistics about tonight. I'm live, the MCs are live, but to ensure the best video recordings, the presentations you're going to see have been pre-recorded. You see, we're going to put them up on the TEDx website or YouTube channel fairly soon. So the Q&A function is disabled, the chat is operating, and at the end of this event, in about 2 hours, you'll have a chance to go into breakout rooms and ask Q&A with some of the speakers, and also to meet your fellow attendees. I hope you're going to join us. A vision, like a child, needs a village to help raise it. And I am so fortunate that my co-organizer, Randy Bretz from Lincoln, Nebraska, has an entire village worth of skills in one person and the connections to have brought into this event first-class production and design talent. Randy's also, more importantly to me right now, modeling that vision I still hold in my life. I've been watching him for 6 months, and on an almost daily basis, he's using his time and talent to bring out the best in people and help them be their best selves. He certainly has done that with me. It is an honor and privilege to introduce to you the TEDx Mountain View co-curator, Randy Bretz.
You know, it was just 10 years ago that I produced my first TEDx event, and it was in Lincoln, Nebraska, and our theme was Innovation on the Prairie. Since that time, I've helped produce more than 20 TEDx events, and I have attended a number of TED events. That's put me in touch with an incredible community of people. I call them friends, my TEDx friends, and some are even like family. There's Anna down in Brazil, Christina over in Spain, and Richard in Poland, and Jimmy in China, and Tracy in Australia. I could get on, but you get the idea. And I met Jennifer through this TEDx group of people, and we started meeting each Saturday on Zoom. And well, you're not here to listen to my stories about TEDx, but there is just one more story that I do want to share with you. I need to share this about a second TEDx Lincoln event, which was done in the studio of Nebraska Public Media. That's a statewide television and radio network that covers the entire state of Nebraska. They assigned a young man to be the television director. That young man is Ryan Dobish. And in the last 9 years, we've become very close. Well, I asked him to help put together TEDx Mountain View. This evening, as you take in these heartfelt ideas that you're going to hear from our speakers, just send a quiet round of applause to Ryan, because he edited every single minute that you're going to watch tonight. This young man is one of the best television directors and best editors that I have ever known. And I've worked with quite a few, and I'm privileged to call him friend. And in fact, he's sitting at his computer right now, backing me up to make sure that our technology works. So thank you, Ryan Dobish. Now, as we put this evening together, one of the first decisions that Jennifer and I talked about was, should we be live or should it be virtual? And we decided it should be virtual because we didn't know what was going to happen with COVID. Well, that means two things have changed. Number one, we felt it would be better to shorten the length of the talks. So most of what you will hear tonight will be straight to the point. And second, we realized that it's a virtual event, so we could have people, as Jennifer said, all over the world. And we do have people, as best we can tell, from 5 different continents. Well, I'm pleased to be part of TEDx Mountain View, and I know that you'll not just enjoy the talks this evening, you'll get a real look into the heart of technology. And you'll learn about the innovative things happening all across our country and indeed all around the world.
One of my intentions, as I mentioned, in organizing TEDx Mountain View was to model what diversity looks like. Again, not as a main topic, but as an outcome of talent meeting opportunity, where people being valued regardless of their age, their race and gender or personal preference is a norm and not an exception. When I asked our first speaker to talk, she assumed I wanted her to talk about diversity. After all, she's a senior non-white woman in tech, and that's what all the conferences want her to speak on. In fact, 4 out of the 7 women assumed I wanted to talk them to talk about diversity because they were women or women of color in tech. I said, Jen, No man would have asked me that question. You're a director of engineering at Facebook. That's a hard job to get regardless of your gender. The fact that you are a woman, an immigrant, and a mother is going to come out in your talk. You need to talk about your skill set, technology, because you are one of the leading people in your field in the world. And if we're going to overcome diversity, part of that is we have to overcome our inner glass ceilings and step up and show up as our best selves. Here to show us how that's done and to share some wicked cool innovative technology about increasing cloud capacity is Jin Zhang, Director of Engineering at Facebook, talking to us about evolving from Moore's Law.
My mom is 76, and I am her tech support. The most frequent issue she runs into with her iPad and smartphones is data. She has accumulated so much data that she's running out of space. Now, on the other end of our generational spectrum, here comes my teenage daughter, who took 50 pictures of the exact same pair of her Converse shoes just to be able to pick the best one to post on her Instagram. Consequently, my family's entire iCloud storage was used up. For me, this is not just a personal problem, but also a work challenge. You see, I work at Facebook as an engineering director, and it is my job to ensure there is enough space, which is what I call cloud capacity, for every user. Today, my company has about 2.6 billion users. Let's imagine each of these users uploaded one photo. If I print these photos into our 4x6s and stack them side by side, the prints will have enough so that they could circle our entire beautiful Earth, not just once, but a total of 10 times. To support these users, we not only need to store all the data, but we also need to process them, which means we need computers, lots of them. A technology research company called IDC made a prediction that data stored in the cloud would reach 100 zettabytes by 2025. That is 100 trillion billion bytes. At this rate, simply adding more computers will no longer be a sustainable solution. You may wonder, data has been growing fast like this for quite a while, so why is it a big deal? You're right. I was never worried because I had a superpower in my pocket, and it's called Moore's Law. So what is Moore's Law? It is a prediction that says computers get faster for the same cost. In 1965, Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel, predicted that the number of transistors on the silicon chip would double every year. The semiconductor industry took his prediction as their North Star, and they met the challenge. 10 years later, Mr. Moore revised his prediction for the number of transistors to double every 2 years. The semiconductor industry met that challenge again. When I first came to the US for graduate school in 1994 from Inner Mongolia, my professor told us about Moore's Law. And he basically said, there's no need to worry about how to keep up with the growing data because Moore's Law was taking care of it. This has been true for the last 50 years till recently. There is now a physical limit of the silicon chip getting reached, and therefore we now start to see the slowdown. To give you a rough example, on the silicon chip the size of my fingernail, there can be up to 50 billion transistors. 50 billion. That's 10 times the number of trees we have on this planet. Recognizing that Moore's Law may no longer help us as significantly, the entire cloud infrastructure industry worked together looking for new methods to bend down that demand curve. So here you can see this green line here indicating our computer supply. And this blue line is the increasing demand to store and to process the data. As you can see, the supply and the demand are mostly kept up, but you also start to see a gap, and this gap is widening. This means my dear mom may have to delete her precious videos and photos. This means you and I may have to pay more for our iCloud storage. This also means more and more data centers are going to be built, consuming more power, cooling, and space on the planet. Luckily, my colleague and I do have a few methods here, each of them bending down the demand curve a little bit at a time. And here, I'd like to share 3 of them with you. The first method we use to bend the demand curve is by introducing hardware accelerators. Hardware accelerators is like specialists in a hospital. While a general doctor can be very good triaging and admitting a lot of patients, she scales herself by referring specific patients to the specialist. In the data processing world, these can be video encoding or an intensive artificial intelligence calculation. Adding the hardware accelerator to a computer is like adding specialist support to a general doctor, and working together, they become much more efficient by focusing on what they're best at. To give you a rough example, if I tell my computer to recognize the image of my daughter's shoe photo, it would have taken about a day using a regular CPU, but with hardware accelerators, this can be done under 30 minutes. Hardware accelerators helps to bend the demand curve. The second method to bend the demand curve is by using software to optimize our cloud platform. Now, platform optimization is like playing the game of Tetris. The different colors of tiles are like different types of computers in my data center. Some are for storage, while the others are for compute. I would spread and stack them so that there's as little wasted space as possible, which means I get to have less idle computers and a higher utilization rate. This Tetris game is so fancy that it's even 3D, which means I get to leverage time zone. When the users from the continent of Asia went offline, I can possibly use those computers to process data for our North American users. And just like any gamers, I would keep track of my gaming scores from one day to the next, and each day I get to bend that demand curve a little bit more. Now, the third method, also the newest, is to change how the data is used, therefore where the data is stored. For example, there is a technology called on-device compute. Instead of uploading all the data up to the cloud and then process them up there, we would process the data locally on your devices, either your iPhone or your laptop. And from there, only a subset of the data after processing gets uploaded to the cloud. If you imagine my data centers literally as a box, this approach is literally thinking outside the box. By reducing the amount of data uploaded onto the cloud, we get to bend that demand curve a little bit more. To sum it up, as you can see, there are multiple technology inventions being used to address this steep growth curve of data. As a result of applying hardware accelerators, software optimization, and on-device compute, all the cloud computers are holding strong for all that usage. If I can give you an example, in the last 8 minutes or so, since I started this talk, more than 4,000 hours worth of video got uploaded to YouTube. About 120 million messages were sent by text. And my daughter may have just uploaded another 50 photos of hers. Keeping up with all the data growth will continue to be a challenge, But I am optimistic that we will continue to have new inventions being developed along the way. I'm committed to support all of my cloud users, ensuring there is enough space to carry their stories. I'm committed to be my mom's tech support, guarding her photos and videos. But I do plan to go talk to my daughter about her thousands of the same shoe photos. Someday, even when I no longer have the support from Moore's Law, I'm confident that my colleagues and I will find ways to operate millions of our cloud computers and operate them well. Because these computers are indeed so important to us. They carry not only all the data, but also our memory, our laughter, and the stories of our lives.
Wow. Thank you, Jen. I'm so glad that there are infrastructure engineers like you and your colleagues at Facebook and those at other companies working to ensure that the cloud has enough capacity to support all of our connections and memories. I'm still going to have to erase some of the speaker coaching files I had from this event, but I'm glad my photos can stay. You know, with all this online connection capacity, I think we should make sure to go outside and call a friend and see people in person. Let's help the offline human connection keep up to speed with our online connection as well. Speaking of connections, I miss being in the office. I have been working at home for 19 months. While I'm glad for that opportunity, I miss the friends, the gym, the socializing. What I don't miss though is the commute. Silicon Valley is a great place to live and everyone knows about it. So driving a few hours, if I get stuck in rush hour, can take 40 minutes. At the end of a long day, I often wish I could sit back and let someone else do the driving or something else do the driving. I've been watching my friends with self-driving cars with great interest. A little worried though about the safety because there's some crazy drivers around here. My next speaker though has let me know that the robotic brains that help drive autonomous vehicles actually can learn very quickly because they connect with the other robotic brains in their fleet and so can get thousands and millions of bits of data helping increase their driver safety record. Shilpa Gulati is the head of behavioral prediction at Waymo and is one of the leading experts in her field on this topic. Please join me in welcoming Shilpa, who is talking on how autonomously driven vehicles become experienced drivers.
As a teenager, to pass the long, boring summer days, I read whatever books I could find at the local bookstore in my hometown in India. As luck would have it, I discovered the series Robot by Isaac Asimov at the local bookstore and was captivated by the idea of positronic brains so capable they made robots indistinguishable from humans. The chief robo-psychologist in the series was a woman who became a role model, if only fictional, at a time when women role models in science and technology were rare. So began my dream of building intelligent robots. 25 years later, I find myself a part of making that dream a reality, helping build the fully autonomous driving technology as lead of behavior prediction at Waymo, formerly Google's self-driving car project. Sure, these robot brains are not conscious, yet they are experienced drivers that can drive cars in complex urban environments. They can perceive, predict, and plan. They learn from the combined experience of all other vehicles in the fleet. To put this in perspective, an average human driver learns from their own driving experience of around 900,000 miles in their lifetime, while the autonomous driving technology I work on learns from over 20 million miles collected by our fleet to date and counting. To understand how autonomous driving technology becomes an experienced driver, imagine for a moment that you are driving in this situation that I saw during my work. What do? First, you observe the world around you and combine it with a mental map you may already have to identify roads, lanes, nearby signs and signals, construction zones, etc. You also build a picture of other road users around you, who they are, such as cyclists, cars, pedestrians, etc., where they are, and how fast they are going. You also interpret body language of others around you. While a human can see 210 forward-facing degrees at a time, our autonomous driving technology can see in 360 degrees, night and day. It can do this by combining information from a suite of sensors like LiDARs, cameras, radars, etc., with prior maps, and using machine learning models trained on millions of examples from across several cities in the US to detect, track, and classify objects. As a human driver, after perceiving the world around us, we predict what others will do next. We cannot read each other's minds, and therefore we cannot know the intent of others for sure. So we make a prediction of multiple possible future behaviors and the chance of each happening. In this case, two possible behaviors are the motorcyclist crosses in front of us or they do not cross. We can predict these behaviors because we are able to generalize from our past driving experience where we may have seen similar examples. How might an autonomous driving technology predict? One way is to list the set of possible behaviors as rules, such as if a motorcyclist on the side of the road is pointing to the road, they are going to cut in. But what about the case where the motorcyclist is pointing to the road only because they are in the middle of a parallel parking maneuver? The problem with rules is that as engineers try to generalize to a range of scenarios, they have to make rules more complex. They have to add exceptions and exceptions to exceptions. There are inevitably loopholes. Think about how messy and hard to understand our tax system, which is a rule-based system, is. Well, thankfully, it turns out engineers can do better, much better in building the prediction system of an autonomous driving technology. Engineers can build models that learn from data, get better as they see more scenarios and not more complex, and generalize to examples they may never have seen before. If you are in your car, after predicting what others will do next, you plan what you will do. If you think the motorcyclist is going to cut in, you slow down and let them come. If you think they are going to wait for you, you proceed. If you are not sure, you proceed with caution. The autonomous driving technology I work on can do all this. It uses sophisticated mathematical models that consider the road geometry, traffic rules, physics, and predictions of others to plan safe and comfortable motion as it drives. It develops a nuanced understanding of the local driving behavior by learning from the combined experience of our highly trained autonomous driving specialists and also from billions of miles of simulated data. Here is an example of our autonomously driven vehicle safely navigating the motorcycle example we discussed. Here is an example where it shares the road with bicyclists. Here is one where it proceeds with caution around people standing behind a moving truck. Here is one where it perceives, predicts, and reacts to a red light runner. As you can see, the autonomously driven vehicles I work on can perceive, predict, plan, and learn from each other's experience. If you think about prediction, it is about anticipating the intents, actions, and reactions of others. It is kind of like giving robots empathy. I did not know that I would be working on giving robots empathy, but looking back at many of Isaac Asimov's stories, that's what they were about. While you are likely not going to talk to R2-D2 anytime soon outside of Disneyland, today you can hail a ride in one of our autonomously driven vehicles in the metropolitan Phoenix area from an app on your cell phone. During your uneventful ride, you may soon forget that you are being driven by one of the most sophisticated robot brains designed to date by humans. And this is just the beginning. Imagine what robot brains that can perceive, predict, plan, and learn from each other do to revolutionize our everyday lives, not just in moving people and goods, but making our lives easier in our homes, reducing tedium at some jobs, and helping people heal in hospitals.
Wow, thank you, Shilpa. Okay, I'm convinced. It definitely sounds like robotic brains can learn to handle driving decisions well. You know, if robots can mimic the human brain and learn, what can humans learn from robots? Maybe we can do what they're doing to learn. Is there some skill that you would like? Playing the guitar, maybe doing Tai Chi? Let's go out and talk to others doing it, learn and practice, practice, practice till we get it right. After working in New York City for 4 years as an investment banker and management consultant, I returned to my roots in Silicon Valley and really wanted to get a job that made a difference in the world. I turned to nonprofit, and the first nonprofit I worked for, World Business Academy, had this premise that political institutions were not keeping up with the rate of change in the world, and that business, as the most powerful institution, needed to step in and take responsibility for us to have a healthy climate and a healthy society. When I first met our next speaker, Scott Shute, at an event, I was so happy to see a business executive actually doing this. He was a VP at LinkedIn, managing an operations function, and then he went even further to model career passion and did a pivot, creating his most recent role at LinkedIn as head of mindfulness and compassion programs. Scott has been a pioneer in mainstreaming mindfulness and operationalizing compassion in the corporate context. He is committed to changing work from the inside out. His recent book, The Full Body Yes, helps us open up to the possibility that work can be a source of happiness and authentic meaning, as well as a source of income, if we work from the inside out. Please join me in welcoming Scott Shute, talking about let's change the world for good.
As we attempt to emerge from the fog of COVID, the workplace is trying to figure out, how do we get people back? How do we get stuff done? Where are they going to be? But before we architect the shiny new future that we all desperately want to get to, let's pause, let's stop, and realize that we have this giant red reset button in front of us, the reset button of work that might only come around once a lifetime or once a century. Because the people we're trying to bring back to work are not the same people as they were before the pandemic started. They've been through trauma, both individually and collectively. And oftentimes, work has been part of that trauma, as it has for thousands of years. So I believe that companies can do way more than just bring people back to work. Companies can actually help us heal. Because 3.5 billion of us, that's how many of us are in the workplace, have just been through this giant wave, this wave of disruption and distraction and division. We've been divided, the reds and the blues, the black and the brown and the white, the haves and the have-nots. And along with the losses, both big and small, from COVID, we're a little bit bruised and battered. And our state of mental well-being is suffering. Here are some sobering statistics. The CDC will tell us that 1 in 3 Americans are suffering from symptoms of anxiety or depression. A workplace survey of thousands of employees across 17 industries tells us that 83% of workers are feeling emotionally drained. And for me, perhaps most disturbing, in the last 30 days, 1 in 9 Americans has seriously considered taking their own life. 1 in 9. And while there's no vaccine for burnout, there is a playbook that companies can use to help be part of the healing that must occur before we move forward. And you might ask, well, what's the role of a company in all of this and all of the stuff going on in society? But in the course of human history, companies have never had this much power or influence. A company can influence individual behavior and group behavior, behavior of society, in ways that governments and religions have been doing for thousands of years. But global trust in governments has reduced over time, and global attendance to religious services has gone down over time, while companies continue to gain more and more influence and power. In fact, companies are already shaping our behavior. They're shaping our consciousness, shaping society. The question is it for good? You see, a company's superpower is getting stuff done. In fact, it's in the survival DNA of a company. If a company doesn't get stuff done, it ceases to exist. And we can operationalize these big concepts at work. So as an example, in my previous role, I was the VP of Global Customer Operations at LinkedIn. And it was my job, along with the team of 1,000 people, to operationalize this big idea that we care about our customers. We want to serve our customers. And in a similar way, companies can take a big idea like compassion or connection and operationalize it. A company could get stuff done in a way that religions and governments cannot. And with all the things there are to do, let's talk about 3 simple ones in a playbook of how to help employees with their mental well-being. The first one is, it starts at the top. It starts with deciding what type of company we're going to be. Is the company going to be in business just for profit, just for shareholders? Or will it be in business for good, for all of the good? It turns out this shouldn't be a hard business decision, because the research shows that a company who takes care of all of their stakeholders, balances the needs of the shareholders and the employees and the customers, these companies actually are more profitable. They are 14 times, that's 1,400% more profitable than the S&P average. And as an employee, if you work at one of these companies who's trying to do good in the world, you look around and you say, wow, my company is doing good things, which means that my work matters. It means that my life matters. A company can connect us to a higher purpose. A company can also connect us to each other and heal some of this divide, because within any group, within any company, we have all the flavors. We have red and blue and black and brown and white and haves and have-nots all working together towards a common goal. And when we're working towards a common goal, we tend to see each other as similar, and the differences between us fade. And that means the divide between us can start to heal. Work can actually help us connect with each other. And perhaps most interesting to me, perhaps most relevant in this moment in time, is that a company can help employees heal our well-being, our mental well-being. It could be as simple as offering easier access to counseling services, lower the barrier of entry to getting the help people need. And when more people get help they need, then it reduces the stigma, removes the stigma around people getting the help they need. It could be as simple as offering mindfulness programs, like a workshop on building resilience, or a workshop on growth mindset, or group meditations, where we come together and connect, but also connect. Many companies are now offering free access to meditation apps like Wise at Work or Insight Timer or 10% Happier. And I've seen the power, I've seen the influence of these programs. In the last few years at LinkedIn, we've done this 30-day mindfulness challenge. And this last time, we got over 100 other companies to join us. And collectively, we had 30 million minutes of meditation together in the workplace. All right, if we were together in person, I'd have to wait for the clapping to die down, so I'll give you a second. 30 million minutes! It's amazing. And I've seen the results, the ROI, if you will, on these activities. Among our employees who used the app regularly over the course of the 30 days, the number of people who said they were totally stressed out and imbalanced and had low amounts of calm, that number reduced by 75%. And the people who said they had high amounts of calm and low amounts of stress and they were fully balanced, that number more than doubled, 105% increase. This works. But still, some people say, really, should I invest in this? Really? Well, consider this. Just like companies are at this unique space in time where they have more power than ever, employees as a whole have more influence and power than ever. If we think about the history of work, in the agrarian age, building the pyramids, we had kings and slaves. And then industrial age, lots of people working in a factory, all making the same thing, cogs in a machine. And in neither case were workers treated very well or honored very much. But in the information age, many companies don't have manufacturing lines or hard goods. They have data. And so the number one resource, the most valuable resource, is our people, the employees. So it makes good sense to invest in your number one resource. But also consider this. In another recent workplace survey, 56% of employees said they were actively looking for their next job. I talk with a lot of leaders, and when I ask them what their biggest problem is, their biggest challenge is finding enough great people to get the work done. I'm guessing that those 56% are going to find their next job with a manager, a team, a company that's willing to invest in them. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine, Lisa. And Lisa's a young mom, and she is keeping it it all together. She's got 2 little kids at home, and she's doing it all. She's cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids even when daycare was closed because of COVID. She called to thank me for the mindfulness programs that we offer at work. And she said, thank you. Because of these practices, I'm screaming at my kids a lot less. And she said it in a way that let me know that she was kidding, but not kidding. And she went on to say, I'm a better mom. I'm a better partner. I'm more focused. I'm more balanced. I'm better at work. I'm a better version of myself. So this is not the story of Lisa, but Lisa's story is the story of all of us who are working. And a company can help. It can help us connect to ourselves, be better versions of ourselves, can help us connect with each other and help heal the divide that exists in our society, and can connect us to something higher, a purpose that allows us to know that our work matters, that our life matters. So as we're standing in front of the giant red reset button and getting ready to architect what's next in the world of work, the red reset button, it may not say easy right on top of it, but it is way past time we push it.
Wow, Scott. Business that helps take care of wellness as well as financial needs, business that helps us connect. I am so happy that my dreams and vision have someone like you as a champion. You got me thinking, people watching, what's your red reset button? Is there any area of your life that you'd like to reset? And how could you use that to make a difference in your community? Speaking of communities, one of the things that contributes a lot right now in my life is community. And one of those, I have meetup communities, and I have a global TEDx organizer community. There were hundreds of us from dozens of countries set to descend on New York City for a TED event in April of 2020. Well, that didn't happen. And as Randy said, a lot of us went online and formed a digital community. In fact, this pandemic is bringing into focus how important community is, both locally and globally, and especially now at work, when people are working remotely or want that chance. But how do we do it effectively? How do you have good community in a structured way? How does it scale? What metrics do you use? Our next speaker is one of the world's leading experts in this area. As head of Google's developer relations infrastructure ecosystem, he has helped develop over 2,000 communities in more than 130 countries. Please join me in welcoming Uttam Tripathi, talking about building self-sustaining and including digital communities to scale globally, think locally.
Hastu is from Yogyakarta in Indonesia. She had a dream. Hastu wanted to be a software developer, but she thought that would be almost impossible because Hastu is hearing impaired. Then she met Tasya in her local Indonesian developer student club. Tasya took the time to mentor Hastu in mobile app development. Fascinated by what she learned, Hastu went ahead and dedicated her time building a mobile app that facilitated connections between blind and sight volunteers. She aspires to be a CTO of an Indonesian startup in future. Hastu continues to build apps and solve problems for the local communities. A question often asked is, why are global communities so important? The last 1 year of the pandemic has told us why. Why it's more important than ever to build global communities that are interconnected, build global digital communities. In my role as head of developer programs at Google, I have been working on building and nurturing and growing global communities around developer technologies. This has involved building communities that span 2,000 chapters in 130 countries, reaching over 3 million developers every year, creating opportunities similar to what Hastu found in her local community. Till today, this continues to be the most fulfilling part of my job. Having a large, actively engaged, and global network is being seen by companies, both big and small, as being central to their strategy. One challenge this involves, however, is how to scale globally. My experience has taught me that in order to scale globally, one has to think locally. Let's understand how. A commonly agreed definition of a community is a small or large social unit that has things like norms, values, and other traits in common. When scaling a community, there are 3 areas to focus on. The first one is size, with the goal of creating a large community. Next is engaged. We want to create community that's engaging with each other and is self-sustaining. Finally, diversity and inclusive, having a diverse and inclusive community. Let's start by looking at how to grow the size of your community. The idea here is sum of parts. To have a large community, one needs to identify which countries, regions, cities, towns, and villages need to be prioritized for setting up and growing the community. Identifying the key influencers at the micro level and building a strong partnership with them. One of my first projects at my current company was to set up and build developer groups in India. Now, India is a large country with 1.4 billion people and tens of millions of developers. To get started, I first looked at traffic coming to our website and identified which were the metro regions from where users were accessing our developer content. As a next step after that, we prioritized those regions to establish and grow our community. We went local. Over the years, this is an approach I know many other community practitioners have continued to take when they want to grow the size of their community. Next, growing engaged communities, making sure they are self-sustaining. We live in a world of different needs and opportunities. What is interesting for your audiences in Japan is likely very different from what is interesting for your audiences in Brazil. My own experience has taught me that when working with developers in Japan, there is a lot of interest for things like gaming technologies. On the other hand, in Brazil, there is renewed interest around cloud technologies and work happening around that. So when someone wants to build up a more engaged community, the question that needs to be thought about is, what kind of content does your community wants to talk about? What kind of support do they need? What kind of connections do they want to build with other local communities and other local stakeholders and sponsors? Taking one-size-fits-all approach never works while answering these questions. What works is prioritizing the needs of your community at local level. Finally, how can we not just create the largest community, but also the most diverse and inclusive one? Not create a walled garden, but a park where everyone is welcome. When looking at doing this globally, there are some challenges which are universal, like underrepresentation of women in tech. For many other elements of diversity and inclusion, however, the definition changes country by country and region by region. What is defined as underrepresented community in one region can be drastically different from what is defined as underrepresented community in another region, sometimes even neighboring countries. As an example, what constitutes underrepresented groups in Indonesia is very different from what constitutes as underrepresented groups in the Philippines. When looking at making your community diverse and inclusive, ask the question, who are the underrepresented groups at the local level that you'd like to empower? Only then you can claim that you have a diverse and inclusive community globally. With the communities that I currently work with the developer communities I currently work with, there is still a lot more to do. And as we'll continue to scale globally, we'll continue to think locally.
Thank you, Uttam. It is so important to understand how local connections and needs are, especially in a large global organization. I found your comments about underrepresentation being different in different regions to be very insightful. Those of you watching, who's underrepresented in your communities? And it may not always be the obvious people. Is there anything that you can do to help them thrive? I had the pleasure of meeting our next speaker when we were rowing on the same team at a fitness competition at Google. Stephanie and I sat near each other at Google Cloud and developed a good friendship. I had been impressed with her marketing globally skills for a long time, first at Google and now at Coursera. And that grew when I found out that not only was she a great business professional, but she has 2 children under the age of 5. And in watching her, I think she's a pretty good mother. It wasn't until she handed me a ticket to one of her performances at the Berkeley Symphony that I discovered her success secret. You see, Stephanie's a very accomplished cellist who has performed at concert halls around the globe, including the Kennedy Center and Sydney Opera House. Through music, Stephanie has understood that the key isn't necessarily to finding work-life balance, but maybe to finding work-life harmony. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Wu.
That was the beginning of the Sarabande, the heart of Johann Sebastian Bach's Suite No. 6. Bach wrote this piece 300 years ago for a 5-stringed instrument. My modern-day carbon fiber cello has only 4 strings. What I had to do to play the Sarabande is what I do to succeed as a marketer, musician, and mom of 2 kids under the age of 5. Here in Mountain View, I'd like to share a few things I've learned about finding work-life harmony. First, know your limits. The cello can't play more than 2 notes at once due to the physical limitations of the bow, which is straight, and the way the 4 strings are arranged in a rainbow shape across the bridge. I roll chords like this to give the illusion of playing 4 notes at a time. But in actuality, I'm focusing on 1 note at a time. I find creative solutions like playing 2 strings with 1 finger or using my thumb. We all have to creatively work around constraints since we have only 24 hours a day. When I worked as a marketer at Google, I occasionally took vacation time to rehearse with the Berkeley Symphony. I find work-life harmony when I engage in meaningful activities that resonate with my core values, such as education and community. When my musician friends and I volunteered to play a Mozart quartet at a preschool a few years ago, we asked the kids for any songs they'd like us to play. They first requested Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Then they requested the alphabet song. The kids were absolutely delighted, and they had no idea that it was the same song but with different lyrics. This was news to me too, and when I excitedly told my mom, she simply replied, "And you got a degree in social studies and music from Harvard?" Actually, the process of writing my senior thesis in college helped stimulate my creativity. Whenever I had writer's block, I would play my cello until a new idea popped into my head, and then I continued writing again. Little did I know that Einstein, too, played the piano or the violin whenever he was stuck on a physics problem. Studies have shown that music can boost out-of-the-box thinking. So let's do a creative activity right now. I'm going to play the entire sarabande for you, and I invite you to listen carefully to the rich harmonies, up to 3 or 4 voices at once. Sometimes those voices come into conflict with one another. This is a musical term we call dissonance, like the notes D and E played at the same time. Musicians use dissonance to express emotion. While I'm playing the sarabande, I'd like you to imagine that the clashing notes represent work and life. When you feel tugged in different directions, recognize that your multiple roles as a caregiver or a working professional help give your life meaning, just like the dissonance in the sarabande enriches the music. As the music ebbs and flows, you can find work-life harmony if you stay true to yourself and your values. Life is like a song, and it's up to you to write your own lyrics. Just do me a favor. Please don't write it to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. With that, I'll leave you with the sarabande from Johann Sebastian Bach's 6th Cello Suite.
Stephanie, thank you. That was beautiful. You're so right that finding something that lights up our heart and following our passion can help us to get the balance and energy to deal with all the demands of life. What is it that brings harmony in your life? Do you like cooking or hiking, maybe woodworking? Put some time on your calendar this week to do it. Better yet, share it with someone else. For me, it's dancing. And in putting on a big event at work on Tuesday and TEDxMountainView on Thursday, I definitely was making time to have some dancing breaks.
The ideas you've been hearing, and those you will still hear yet this evening, come from the heart of technology, from people working in some of our country's most innovative and technologically advanced companies and organizations. And second, the ideas on our program come from the heart of those sharing. And it's these ideas and so many more among people like we have sharing this evening that are providing the lead as we undergo the transformation to a new economy, the information economy. Well, I just know that you're going to enjoy and be positively touched by the speakers during the second half of our program. We're calling it Transformation. And remember, at the end of our evening together, you're also going to have an opportunity to meet some of the speakers during the breakout sessions, so stay tuned. I posted the link to the breakout session in the chat earlier, and I'll do it again. Well, perhaps you've heard the well-known proverb, necessity is the mother of invention. Our next speaker begins with that point as he talks about a very common tool found in most garages and toolboxes. And as he tells the story, he's illustrating that innovation can happen in the middle of a farm field just as it can happen in a high-tech lab full of scientists. Dr. Shane Ferreter himself is a scientist. Well, his academic credentials will suggest that he's an engineer, but when you get to know him and have seen him as I have, you see him as a very creative scientist. He's done 2 TEDx talks. He has helped develop one of the best maker spaces in the United States, and he's helping invent and develop one of America's latest robotic surgical devices that's making an incredible impact on surgery. But before we hear from Dr. Ferreter, I have a call out to Eric Miller, the founder of a very creative agency here in Lincoln. It's called Storyhook. And as that title would suggest, they believe that every person, every business, every organization has a story. And Eric's agency exists to help discover and share those stories. Well, he helped us by recording this next TEDxMountainView presentation. And now, here's Dr. Shane Ferreter sharing his story, Innovation and Invention on Silicon Prairie.
Today I want to tell you a little bit about innovation, and specifically innovation on what we call the Silicon Prairie here in the Midwest, and specifically in Nebraska. So I want to do that by telling you a little story, the story about locking pliers, or the brand name Vice Grips, which we all know them by. Vice Grips are one of my favorite tools. They were actually invented here in Nebraska, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment, but they're a tool that I love because they're not designed to do any specific job. There's no problem out there that Vice Grips are made to address. Vice Grips are used when things go poorly, when things go bad. So if you have a bolt that's turned off or broken off, or you have a bracket that's broken and there's just a little tab and your only hope is to grab that little tab, what you reach for is Vice Grips. You reach for them when everything else has failed, and that's one of the reasons I love them. Now, I like to collect pictures of strange uses of Vice Grips. So here's a couple nice ones here. Using Vice Grips as a sink handle, using Vice Grips as the handle to a hammer is, I think, a fun one. And in the middle, you can see a hood ornament made from a pair of Vice Grips, which I think shows the love of Vice Grips. Here are kind of some safety-related ones that maybe are bad uses of Vice Grips, but on the left is Vice Grips holding an electrical connector on a private airplane. On the right is a classic. You see this all the time, of Vice Grips being used to steer a car rather than a steering wheel. And in the center is what is a picture recently from the Nebraska State Patrol where they found a trucker who was using vice grips to crimp a brake line. And I think it's really nice that they took the time to zip tie the vice grips to the axle so that it would be extra safe in that implementation. So what's really fun is vice grips were invented in Nebraska by a gentleman named William Peterson, and here's a pair of the original, and they really haven't changed much since this patent. He invented these in 1924. He was a blacksmith in a little town called DeWitt, Nebraska. But you have this screw that opens and closes the jaws to different sizes, and then you have this locking mechanism that closes tight around objects. So you can take a pair and you can adjust to whatever size you like, and you can reach in here and clamp tightly, and you can adjust how tight you grab that. Now, what's very interesting to me is that here's another patent of another inventor of locking pliers, also in Nebraska, and these patents are just 2 years apart. This is 1926. And as near as I can tell, these two gentlemen had no knowledge of one another. These were totally parallel inventions, that in Norfolk, Nebraska, these vice grips were invented while William Peterson was developing his about 70 miles south in DeWitt, Nebraska. This has a different mechanism for that adjustment. I mentioned the adjustment for the size of the jaws. Here's a turnbuckle that allows you to make that same adjustment. So it's kind of a different approach to achieve the same problem. Now the story goes on. In 1966, here's a patent for these, what were called lever grips here. And this is a set of vice grips where that adjustment is made automatically. So you can come in and clamp that on there. Clamp onto something that's small, and then without making an adjustment, you can come into something much larger and clamp on that one, and that adjustment is made for you automatically. Again, you get that tight closure on that, but the size adjustment is made automatically. That technology can still be purchased. I show a modern pair here as well. So, I think this is very interesting. Every major innovation in locking pliers happened in Nebraska and happened within what I'd call the Nebraska Triangle. We've all heard of the Bermuda Triangle, but this is the Nebraska Triangle of locking pliers. I don't think that's a coincidence that all that happened in this tight area. I think the key to this is that the people who made these inventions were addressing problems that were in front of them. People in this area have problems in farming and other areas where they need locking pliers. So it's no surprise that the inventions come from the area located near the problem. So what? So what does this all say? First of all, it says innovation is possible in places like the Silicon Prairie, in the Midwest, and in places like Nebraska. But I think a key to this is noticing that the co-location of the problems with the solutions. You should work on problems that are in front of you. And I think that's key to innovation really everywhere. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, and if you have problems in front of you, this is where innovations can come from. It's at least a very good place to start. So here we are today in a place called Nebraska Innovation Studio. We're doing a lot of things here to foster innovation. This is a makerspace, but it's a very special makerspace in that it brings together artists and engineers, students and retired folks, people from all walks of life to come together and build things and create innovation, hardware-based innovation. Another feature is the place we call the Combine, which is an accelerator here in Nebraska. But this accelerator is special because it's focused on ag tech. And on the right, you'll see a robot called the Grain Weevil, which is designed to drive around inside grain bins. Grain bins are very dangerous and dirty and dusty places, and it's a perfect job for a robot to go in there and make inspections and do the work needed inside of grain bins. This is a problem, again, that's co-located with the solution. I use vice grips as an example. Obviously, that's a very low-tech device. From almost 100 years ago now, but we also have very high-tech things here. This is a robot designed to perform abdominal surgery. Abdominal surgery is also a problem, of course, everywhere, but this is a small robot designed to enter inside the body. Rather than a big robot on the outside, this is a little robot designed to go into the body. This is a world-class technology being developed here in Nebraska. I think the lesson here is that you should work on familiar problems. You should solve the problems that are in front of you. So in a place like Nebraska or the Midwest, that might be ag tech or food processing, or in general, just hardware-based innovation. You should find the pain in front of you and use that as your starting point for innovation. And if you do that, you can have innovation anywhere.
Shane, thank you so much. I think you're right. The best inventions can happen everywhere. And in the chat, people are saying how much they like hearing about tech from Nebraska, that it's not all high tech. And it's so important right now with so much need in the world for us to come up with solutions to local problems wherever you are. What problems do you have in your community? Think about it from an inventor's perspective. Is there something you can do to help, to invent, to solve them? When the next speaker joined the team I was on Facebook, I remember really enjoying how many similarities we had. You see, we both like yoga, although she teaches it and is far more flexible than I am. We both value kindness. We both want to make a difference in the world. And we were both program managers who compared templates on how to manage projects in global business marketing. There's an important difference though. You see, TL's parents are of Jamaican and Chinese ancestry. She grew up facing mixed racial identities and prejudices that I never had to deal with. And how she dealt with them and her leadership role she's taken, both personally and professionally, is one of the reasons why I asked her to speak to us today. TL is the program manager for Elevate, a Facebook initiative whose mission is to bring an increase in economic prosperity in Black and Latinx small businesses. She's also on the steering committee and oversees operations of her division's Racial Justice Coalition. TL brings a clear, hope-filled approach to an often hard to navigate issue. Please join me in welcoming TL Campbell, speaking on differences build togetherness.
Being different builds togetherness. When we share of ourselves and of our experiences, we provide perspective to those that are not directly exposed to such experiences. This creates an openness and understanding to the shared human experience. Celebrating and sharing our differences perpetuate meaningful conversation and interactions. It shapes community, and this consequently builds relationships and togetherness. It was the great Audre Lorde that said, "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." Well, I couldn't agree with her more. Our differences make us who we are, and in sharing our identity, we challenge conformity and complacency, which is a very good and necessary thing. Celebrating our differences gives people permission to be brave, to be themselves. It stimulates creativity and innovation. We learn from others, glean information, and this increases our wealth of knowledge as well as our levels of discernment. The acknowledgement and celebration of my personal differences started at a very young age and mostly through familial and cultural celebrations. I can remember on many occasions sitting around the dinner table with my very large family, with dishes that were from Jamaica and China and of course America. See, my maternal Chinese grandparents settled in Jamaica post-World War II. They established roots there and continued to grow their family, but they always kept their traditions. My mother then migrated to America to provide for me what she explained as a better opportunity and access to education. But she as well passed down those traditions. She also enlisted me in an early childhood development center that was backed by the NAACP. So I had encouragement throughout my entire childhood of celebrating being from two very different cultures, two very different backgrounds. And when we got around that dinner table, the cultures came together in such a way that it made sense. We broke bread, as the proverbial saying goes. We talked about the differences which helped us find common ground and similarities. It brought us together. Not to mention it was quite delicious. Now, celebrating differences doesn't just stop within our smaller groups. We see this exemplified by our innovators, and in particular the tech industry. Think about those leaders who were deemed maybe a little quirky, or who had this audacious idea that seemed almost impossible and went against the grain of the norm. Would we have computers? Would we have medical advancements to prolong and increase the quality of life? Would we have multiple platforms that allow us to communicate with each other, with family, with friends, all around the world, and bring us together to converse despite our differences? Their contributions led to the progression of the world to date, and their differences inspire others to be themselves, to be those influencers, those entrepreneurs and philanthropists that continue to shape the world. They inspire me to show up in my profession. I constantly utilize my differences as a program management lead at Facebook. I've been able to contribute thought leadership and operational excellence through several programs, just harnessing my differences. One very near and dear to my heart is Elevate, whose mission is to accelerate the economic success and impact of Black and Latinx small businesses. If I couldn't be myself and share my opinions and experiences, especially from the viewpoint as a Black and Asian mixed woman who grew up in the Bronx and has her own small business as a yoga instructor, how could the team come together and build a cohesive program that ensures the mission? How could we ensure that we resonate the voice and needs of the community we serve without seeking counsel from different perspectives? Being different allows me to do that, and allows people to show up in various ways that enrich relationships and help us grow as a people. I implore us all to continue to be our unique selves. Let your authenticity, however beautifully different, shine through and ignite your passions and projects. Celebrating and conveying your experiences, but also pass along the resources that you've picked up along the way. In this manner of sharing, we show up in sparking ingenuity. We increase
Well, Jan and I attend the same church as Carissa and her family, and she did a beautiful artistic piece and a video which she shared with members of the church back in the spring. And that's what sparked the idea to ask her to conclude our time together with this short video. I hope you've inspired, or you've enjoyed it and you've been inspired. Oh, and that's 67 on the piece that Carissa did. I asked her and she said, well, it's because she feels we're about 2/3 of the way toward the information age. Each of our speakers in today's event will receive a printed copy of Carissa's finished drawing as a reminder that they are contributing to the heart and to the future of technology. Now, once again, here's Jennifer, who will tell you how you can participate in the breakout sessions with our speakers. Remember, check the chat and grab the link, because it's not in this webinar. We'll be in a Zoom meeting in just a couple of minutes. Jennifer?
Thank you, Randy. And thank you, everyone who's come. This concludes our formal presentation. Get on the chat. Thank you guys so much for helping me with my vision. Thank you, speakers.